Mm. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It's Monday again. And I thought I would put on my Santa cap this morning, or Santa hat, because today I'm going to share with you my top tips for self-care during Christmas. So just bear with me whilst I get all the devices connected up here and make sure they're working, which they are, which is great. So who have we got this morning? If you can hear me, you can see me, give me a little thumbs up or a heart emoji. How are we all doing this morning? I hope we're all well. This is my last video, video in this capacity anyway, before our Christmas holidays. I remember when I started this a number of months ago, I remember thinking to myself, gosh, will I be able to think of enough topics every week to talk about, and what will I talk about? And yeah, I've noticed that as the weeks have progressed, I am thinking of more and more topics, and also you are messaging me topics that are of interest to you as well. So my goodness, I have a list the length of your arm of things that we didn't get to talk about this year, which hopefully will get into conversation next year. Subjects that are, I hope, of interest to you, but also important conversations, hard conversations, perhaps at times uncomfortable conversations, but necessary all the same. So you're all very welcome. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Michelle. I am the founder of the Sunshine Project, and for almost a decade now, I have been developing and delivering various different wellbeing and personal development programs and courses. I guess at the heart and core of everything that I do is about stress and how we can manage the stress in our lives, and how that impacts us, and how we can utilize various different tools and skills to help us. So today we're going to talk about self-care and self-care at Christmas. I guess sometimes when I mention self-care to groups that I'm working with, and I'll say, well, what do you think self-care is? And more often than not, someone will say, oh, it's going to the spa, or it's treating yourself, or it's having a nice bath, lighting the candles. So we have all of these ideas of what self-care is. And I think social media, certainly, and Instagram, that sort of culture, has created this kind of belief around self-care. But self-care is much more than spas and candles and baths. Whilst all of those things are lovely, and I am a fan of all of them, self-care is much, much more than that. And for me, the quote that I really love is actually from the Oxford Dictionary. So it's quite a literal quote about self-care, but I wanted to share it with you. So self-care is the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's health. It's a practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness, in particular during periods of stress. And I thought that was really interesting, in particular during periods of stress. So it's not about forgetting self Because sometimes when we are going through stressful times, we tend to put ourselves further down the list of priorities. And actually, those are the times that we need to move ourselves up the ladder of priorities, which I'm sure you've heard me talking about quite a lot. So I would really love to hear, what does self-care mean for you? When you think of self-care, what's the first thing comes into your mind when you think about it? Just type it in the comments section. I was listening to a podcast the other day with It's Happy Place, Fern Cotton, and Robbie Williams. It's very, very good. Go and listen to it if you get a chance. And what he was saying was, he said, I think we should change the word selfish to self-care. And I thought that's really interesting, because more often than not, we have this association that self-care is a selfish practice, but in actual fact, it's a selfless practice, because it's impossible to look after anyone else if we're not looking after our own needs. And it's a wee bit like that analogy of going on an airplane, if you can remember what they are, and they talk about the oxygen mask coming down, and they always say, put it over you first and then say to your child. And as a mother, you would think it would be the opposite way around, wouldn't it? Instinctively, you want to help your child first, don't you, in a crisis like that. But in actual fact, if you can't breathe, then how can you look after anyone else? So I love that analogy about self-care. Fill up your own cup first. So, Christmas is going to be different for a lot of people this year than what it was perhaps in previous years. This year, there's no question, it's been really challenging in lots of different ways. And those challenges for some people have been worse than others. So we can't really compare our own situation with everybody else's, because we're all experiencing this very differently. It also depends on what country you live in, how COVID is, our healthcare system, for example. Some countries don't have a free healthcare system, so they have a lot more concerns perhaps about that and financial things than perhaps we do in our country. So whilst COVID is a global pandemic, how we are all internalizing it and experiencing it is very, very different. And this year, some of us have been more isolated than we've been before, and then others have been compressed into proximity, whereby we have been operating in the same home with the same people, working from home, homeschooling, and that can be quite intense, as can the isolation. So in previous years, perhaps we looked forward to Christmas because we could spend time with our family, and perhaps we've just spent so much time with our family now, it can feel a little bit, it can feel like the boundaries are getting crossed, etc. So how can we manage this Christmas, and what can we bring in to look after ourselves, but also make sure that our whole family is looked after as well? And I think the first point is to recognize that whilst we are all having to navigate a very different Christmas, in terms of deciding, there's always a decision, isn't there, like where we're going to go, or who's going to come to us and who's going to be included. That always has been the case for Christmas, but more so now this Christmas, with all of the rules and regulations and the new norms, and recognizing as well that those are constantly changing and constantly shifting. And so there's a huge amount of uncertainty and trying to navigate around that as well. So I think my first top tip there is to just be a little bit more compassionate with yourself and others. Navigating around this can be tricky, and it can also cause some stress as well. So the first thing is, Christmas is not cancelled. It perhaps is going to be a little bit different this year. So whilst there is this uncertainty, and whilst there are these rules and regulations, we all have the ability within ourselves to create our own Christmas. And my first top tip is to set a Christmas intention. So an intention is something I talk a lot about in mindfulness. An intention is where you take a moment to pause and to see the situation and how you want the situation to look and how you want the situation to feel. So rather than being unconscious or, you know, the rabbit in the wheel, or not the rabbit, what is it? The rat? No, mouse in the wheel? You know what I mean. Rather than you just continuing on with your days and going with the flow, which is okay too. Perhaps just taking a moment to ask yourself, well, how do I want my Christmas to look and feel? What words spring to mind when you think of that? So actually bringing some consciousness to your Christmas and setting some intentions. Also, whilst there is still the social distancing, it's so important that we do stay connected, that we don't isolate ourselves further. So keeping in touch with loved ones, even if you can't see them, and I know a lot of families are separated this Christmas because of COVID, you know, picking up the phone rather than texting, doing a voice message, so people can hear your voice, doing video calls, using Zoom, all of those things, or even going out for a walk if that's possible as well, going out into nature, bringing a nice flask of tea or coffee or soup or whatever, and spending some time in nature with friends and family as well. And also, I think at Christmas, we have this really high expectation that we have to be happy and jolly all of the time. And I think sometimes we just need to lower that expectation a little bit of ourselves and of others. And also, just because it's Christmas doesn't mean to say you can't feel your feelings. So whatever you're feeling, just know that it's normal and it's natural, and allow that feeling to be expressed, rather than stuffing it down or distracting with something else. And also, I've talked a lot about this as well, about expectations and also about boundaries, but that's my next top tip, is to create boundaries that feel safe for you and feel comfortable for you. And sometimes that's a no. Sometimes we have to say no, and being comfortable with that and being okay with that. Just because it's Christmas, we don't have to agree to everything. And I certainly think there's a lot more tolerance this year in terms of our boundaries with other people and expectations. So just checking in with yourself and recognizing what feels comfortable and perhaps what doesn't. And honouring those boundaries. My next, hope this is making sense, my next top tip is to find joy or cultivate joy. So some of the things that bring me joy, and that might not be for you, but for me, it's walking, nature, so getting outside into the fresh air. I think that's important, especially if we're spending a lot of time in the home, just getting out into nature. Just because we can't go dancing this year doesn't mean to say we still can't dance and sing. So turning the TV off and putting on some music and dancing, being creative. So perhaps if you're into DIY, doing some DIY, or baking or cooking, following a new recipe, colouring in, knitting, crafting, whatever that might be, just when you have this extra time, doing something that's going to spark that inner joy. Perhaps buying yourself a new book, journaling as well. This time of the year, I think, is a really good time to reflect as we move into a new year. And also, I think at Christmas, as any time of the year, if we can, doing something to give back to something, to someone or something bigger than ourselves, that can make some sort of difference in the world. There's been a huge body of research done into kindness and receiving kindness and giving kindness. and actually being the giver of kindness, we receive the same levels of gratification, of oxytocin, which is the love hormone, and it actually has a huge impact on our physical health because of those lovely chemicals that are released from our brain throughout our body. So being on the receipt of kindness is lovely, but actually giving is nice as well. You don't have to give a huge amount, just whatever you can afford in your time or money. And I wanted just to share with you a little box that I prepare. It's a Christmas Eve box. So I'm going to show you. This is what it looks like. So I have one for me, and I also have one for my son, and we give these out on Christmas Eve, obviously. But I was just thinking, it's a little bit like a self-care box, but we get it on Christmas Eve. So I wanted to show you what was in my box and maybe give you some ideas. So I fill this with gifts for myself. So I think after this year, we all deserve to give ourselves something back. It doesn't have to be hugely expensive. You don't have to spend loads of money. You can buy yourself 1 or 2 items. I'm going to show you what's in mine. So I have a diary for next year, 2001 diary. And I also have a little gratitude journal, and in that I can write the things that I'm grateful for, but also, you know, it's really good to have a journal to self-reflect or do self-inquiry work as well. And, you know, there's no doubt about it, this year has been really challenging. So, you know, looking forward to next year, how would you like next year to look? You know, bringing some optimism into next year. What are your hopes for next year, for not only your own life, but for the world as well? So yeah, journal, writing. And I've also bought myself a book called Queenie. So reading a novel. I think Christmas is a lovely time to read, and it's a great escapism, isn't it? Well, I think it is anyway. I have a pen in there too. I also have some of my favorite chocolates, because Christmas isn't Christmas without chocolates, is it? Let's be honest. Now I've also bought myself a new pair of jammies. Aren't they gorgeous? And they're that like brushed cottony, fleecy. Oh, they're so lovely. So yeah, new jammies. And then I treated myself to some Tropic. Tropic is, I love it because it's all completely natural. It's made from essential oils. And in this, I'm not gonna, well, maybe I will open up to show you because it is very pretty. What do I say? It's called a joy drum. So that's very appropriate, isn't it? A joy drum. And in this, what have I got in this to treat myself to? I have luxury bath foam. Interesting that I said at the start that self-care isn't about baths. And now I've got bath foam. Oh, the irony is not lost on me. And it's filled full of lavender, which I love. There's also lovely lavender roll-on, which I would make in the house anyway, but I thought this one might be nice. And also some body velvet. So that is what I've treated myself to this year. What can you treat yourself to in your Christmas Eve self-care box? And also, if you are struggling, please do reach out and either speak to a trusted friend or family member, or tap in with one of the many wonderful organizations. Please do not suffer in silence. Please do reach out. So that is my top tips for this Christmas. I hope that was useful. Do you use a Christmas Eve box? And if you do, you know, what can you put in there that for your own self-care that's going to make you feel good when you open that on Christmas Eve. You might want to include different things. Actually, there's another thing there that I didn't include that's upstairs, and it's a hand cream. And for self-care, I think hand creams are really brilliant. Tropic do another lovely one. And I put it on at night time, and my little boy puts it on as well. And actually, when we put it on, we've lovely acupressure points in our hands, a wee bit like our feet. So it's a beautiful practice, self-care practice to do before bed, a nice hand massage. And then after we do that, we take 3 big deep breaths in, because the smell of the cream is just so beautiful. What's in it? Is there jasmine? I think there's jasmine in it, but it's really, really lovely. And I didn't mention about breathing, but breathing is one way that we can really soothe and calm our nervous system if we are feeling overwhelmed, which a lot of us can feel overwhelmed at Christmas. So that, I suppose that the hand cream acts as an anchor at bedtime, a nice reminder for me and my son to do that practice of hand massage, and then a few lovely big deep cleansing breaths. So that's maybe another idea. Maybe essential oils you want to include in that as well. Again, they're great as an anchor for reminding ourselves to practice our breathing. So yes, I hope you find that useful, and I look forward to touching in with you all again in the new year. I am finishing up this Thursday for 2 weeks. I'm sure I'll touch base with you before that, but just wanted to wish you all a very peaceful and joyful Christmas. I hope you have a good one, and I look forward to touching with you again soon. Take care. Bye.